You're too busy. You've got 17 tabs open, 3 side hustles, a gym membership you don't use, a Tinder date pending, and some imaginary future version of yourself who's rich, famous, shredded, and emotionally stable. As long as you can just grind through another year of burnout and existential numbness, right? You've probably already skipped a funeral or two this year because work couldn't wait. You missed your mom's call, ignored your partner, ghosted a friend. But hey, your phone screen time says you spent 12 hours on Instagram this week, so it's fine. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to say out loud. You're sprinting toward death with your eyes glued to nonsense. And Tuesdays with Morrie, this book is the slap across the face you've been dodging for years. Because while you were panicking over your follower count and your crypto losses, a dying man sat in a chair, slowly suffocating to death, and taught a former student what it actually means to live. Welcome to the class you didn't know you needed. No textbooks, no homework, just a dying man and the uncomfortable truth you've been avoiding your whole life. This is Tuesdays with Morrie, a memoir that's basically a philosophical slap to the face, written by Mitch Albom, a guy who once sprinted through the rat race only to rediscover his soul through a terminally ill professor. And yes, this video falls under the Fair Use Act. It's for educational purposes, transformative in nature, and intended to make you squirm, reflect, and maybe, just maybe, live like you give a damn. Mitch Albom. Ever heard of him? He's a best-selling author, journalist, and sports writer who had it all. Fame, money, a house on a hill, and absolutely no clue what actually mattered in life. Then he saw his old college professor, Morrie Schwartz, on Nightline, dying of ALS, and decided to reconnect. The result? A series of Tuesdays where a dying man became the world's most alive teacher, and Mitch, the frantic achiever, became his student again. But don't get it twisted, this isn't some sentimental Hallmark sob story. It's raw, it's brutally honest, and it's here to call you out, because Morrie didn't die quietly. He made death his final thesis, and he used it to expose all the lies you've swallowed about success, love, time, and meaning. This book isn't just a memoir, it's a mirror, and you're not gonna like what you see. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. The final lesson begins. You wanna know when people start pretending life is working for them? It's right about the time they stop dancing. You see it happen. Someone who used to jump at weddings like they were possessed by James Brown suddenly starts sipping wine and talking about their portfolio. They wear responsibility like armor and silence like dignity. What they're really doing is dying in slow motion, quietly, politely, with a tight little smile and a back-breaking mortgage. And here's the kicker. They'll tell you it's noble. No, Karen, it's not noble. It's tragic. That's what happened to Morrie Schwartz. He was a sociology professor who used to dance like nobody was watching, because nobody was. And then life hit him with a brick wrapped in barbed wire. ALS Lou Gehrig's disease. A diagnosis that doesn't give you a finish line. It hands you a stopwatch and starts the countdown. Most people would spiral, retreat, start measuring out their days in pill bottles and soft foods, but not Morrie. That man made death his curriculum. You see, this wasn't a retirement. It wasn't a fade into the background. This was a man who said, "You want to know what life's about? Then watch me die with purpose." And he wasn't being poetic. He was being literal. No, he didn't write a blog. He didn't do a podcast. He sat in a damn chair by a hibiscus plant in his home with a disease that was eating him alive, and he taught the meaning of life to one final student. No tuition, no grades, just truth. That student? Mitch Albom. A man who, like the rest of us, had been swallowed by capitalism, chewed by ambition, and spat out somewhere between ESPN and existential dread. Mitch used to be one of the good ones, according to Morrie. Took every class, hung on every word, gave the man a briefcase as a graduation gift, a poetic gesture from a kid who once thought sentimentality had a future. But as soon as that degree was in his hand, Mitch did what most of us do. He bailed. Why? Because life gets loud, dreams get expensive, and somewhere between your 20s and your 30s, you start trading what makes you feel alive for what makes you feel secure, and then you pretend they're the same thing. Fast forward 16 years, and Mitch is successful. He's got the money, the name, the status, and none of it matters because he's watching TV one night, flipping through static and noise, and there it is, a dying man on Nightline, with his old professor's crooked teeth and crooked spine, still delivering the truth straight from the edge of the grave. Morrie had become a prophet in a wheelchair, a spiritual hitman who came for your illusions, not softly, but with full clarity and a half-working diaphragm. That interview, it wasn't a swan song, it was a siren. And Mitch, he heard it, loud and clear, so he picked up the phone and showed up, on a Tuesday, and the final lesson began. Now this wasn't your usual academic setup. No lecture halls, no projectors, just one man dying, another man waking up, and a classroom filled with unspoken regrets. There were no exams, but there was homework. Face your damn life. Sit still long enough to hear what your fear is trying to tell you. Stop racing toward nothing just because it feels like progress. You think enlightenment comes on a mountain in Tibet. Try wiping your professor's ass while he tells you why love matters more than legacy. Every Tuesday, Mitch showed up, and every Tuesday, Morrie dropped bombs on marriage, money, work, meaning, death. Not from a stage, not from a podium, from a recliner, from vulnerability, from a place you only reach when you have nothing left to prove. Here's the part that should make you sweat. Morrie didn't start teaching these truths after the diagnosis. He'd been living them the whole damn time, even when he was healthy, even when no one was watching. The disease didn't transform him, it amplified him. You want meaning? That's it right there. Because most of us don't live until we get a deadline, and even then we're too scared to be honest. Morrie wasn't. He told the world he was dying. Then he told it how to live. He wasn't obsessed with legacy. He didn't want statues or scholarships. He wanted people to show up before he died, to say the things we always wait too long to say. So he threw himself a living funeral because he refused to die in obscurity and because people deserve to hear how much they matter while they're still breathing. You think that's self-indulgent? You think that's melodramatic? No, that's clarity. Morrie taught his final course from a deathbed, with dignity as his syllabus and honesty as the required reading. He didn't rage against the dying of the light. He invited the light in. He narrated his collapse like it was a documentary, so that we could stop collapsing in secret. And Mitch, he took notes, but not on paper, in his soul. He wasn't just reporting a story. He was unraveling his own. Watching a man with a crumbling body hold more power, presence, and peace than anyone he'd ever met in a press box. And slowly, Tuesday by Tuesday, the noise of Mitch's life got quieter. The success stopped screaming. The fear stopped barking. Because for once, someone was telling the truth. If you think this is a story about a dying man, you missed the whole damn point. This is a story about all the undead people still walking around pretending they're fine. This is a story about you, about your calendar, your job, your excuses, and your slow, compliant, soul-deep surrender. It's not about dying, it's about finally living before you do. Key takeaway, you're going to die. Pretending otherwise just guarantees you'll waste most of your life on things that don't matter. The question isn't if you'll face that truth, it's when. And by the time you do, will you have time left to fix it? Favorite quote: the last class of my old professor's life had only one student. I was the student. Reconnecting after years apart. You ever notice how we treat old people like used batteries? One day, they're the reason the room's lit up, and the next, we toss them in a drawer, half alive, fully ignored, forgotten until death or dementia makes them inconvenient enough for a group text and a half-assed visit. But what happens when the person you threw in that drawer ends up being the last person on earth who actually understood you? Mitch Albom had that realization too late, and just in time. He was on top of the world, a high-flying sports writer, national columns, TV spots, radio shows, a name with clout, a man who traded in hot takes, stats, and the kind of opinions that make you feel smart at parties. But here's the dirty little secret. You can win the game and still lose your damn soul. Because while Mitch was racking up success points, he was simultaneously ghosting the only person who had ever truly seen him, Morrie Schwartz, his old college professor. The man who, back in the day, gave Mitch more than a degree. He gave him direction, identity, permission to feel without flinching. But as soon as Mitch stepped into the real world trademark, the place where dreams go to get waterboarded by expectations, that connection got buried under deadlines, investments, and the deafening noise of needing to be somebody. Fast forward 16 years, the man who taught him how to live is dying, and the student who swore he'd stay in touch? Now he's just another ghost who stopped writing. Until one night, flipping through channels like the rest of us do when we're trying to drown out the voice in our head, he sees Morrie on Nightline, hooked to disease, unhooked from ego, and instantly Mitch knows he dropped the ball. Bad. This isn't just a trip down memory lane, it's a walk into guilt, dressed as reunion. It's the kind of moment that forces you to confront how many people you said, let's keep in touch to, and then ghosted like you had amnesia. Mitch books a flight, and he doesn't bring flowers, he brings his ego, his guilt, his fancy job title, his sprinting, stress-loaded, over-optimized identity, and deep down, he knows none of it matters to Morrie. When Mitch arrives at the house, he does what most successful people do when faced with real emotion. He stalls. He fumbles with his phone, pretends to search for keys. He delays stepping out of the car like it's a courtroom sentencing. Because what do you say to the man you abandoned, who is now dying? The thing about dying people, they don't do small talk, they don't care about your resume, they care about your truth and how much of it you're still hiding. And Morrie sees through Mitch in 5 seconds flat, not to shame him, but to welcome him back, not just as a visitor, but as a student, because class is still in session and Mitch still has a lot to learn, and if that doesn't punch you in the heart, you haven't been paying attention to your own damn life. You see, this isn't just about rekindling a friendship, it's about reconciling with the part of you that used to feel before ambition turned you into a spreadsheet with legs. Mitch walks back into Morrie's house like he's stepping into an old version of himself, the kid who used to believe in meaning, who thought freedom came from doing what mattered, not just doing what paid. And Morrie, he doesn't ask for apologies. He asks Mitch if he's giving his love away, if he's made peace with his demons, if he's still chasing the world's approval like it's some kind of god. Mitch squirms. Because when you've spent years hiding behind productivity and status, intimacy feels like interrogation. But this is what real mentorship is, not performance reviews, soul check-ins. Morrie doesn't just ask how you're doing, he asks if you're becoming who you promised yourself you'd be. And Mitch isn't. Not yet. But he came back. And that's the beginning. You think reconnection is about nostalgia? It's not. It's about resurrection. It's about dragging your half-dead, success-choked identity out of its shell and letting it breathe again. And Morrie? He's not asking for pity. He's not asking for payback. He's asking Mitch to wake the hell up before the same fate catches him off guard, because death isn't just coming for the old, it's coming for the distracted, the emotionally lazy, the ones who swore they'd call but never did. Mitch starts showing up every Tuesday, and each week as Morrie's body collapses further, his soul expands. Meanwhile, Mitch begins the slow process of shedding everything the world taught him to value, one lie at a time. If you think this is just a tearful reunion between a teacher and a student, you're missing the actual point. This is what it looks like when a man starts to realize his success has become his sarcophagus. This is what it looks like when we admit we've been achieving as a form of emotional escape. And it all started because he picked up the phone. How many Morries have you ignored? How many calls did you silence because they weren't urgent? How many goodbyes did you miss because you thought you had time? You don't. Time isn't a guarantee, it's a question, and it's asking whether you're ready to stop pretending you're too busy to care. Key takeaway: the relationships you neglect while chasing success are the only ones that will matter when success stops calling. Reconnection isn't just possible, it's urgent. You're not too busy, you're just too numb to admit what's really important. Favorite quote: "My old friend," he whispered, "you've come back at last." Capturing wisdom on tape. You know what's funny? We wait until people are half dead to start listening to them. You'll scroll past your mom's texts like she's spam, ignore your grandpa's stories like they're reruns, but then you'll binge a podcast from some tech bro on how to 10x your morning. because he has a blue check and a six-pack, but let someone get terminally ill and suddenly we're all ears. We want their wisdom, we want their truth, because now it's urgent. Now they're disappearing, and for once we believe they're not bullshitting us. They have nothing left to sell. They're not playing the game. That's where we find Morrie. By this point, he's deep in the clutches of ALS. The disease is strip mining his muscles day by day. His legs are done. His lungs are next. He's coughing during meals, wheezing between words. He knows exactly how this ends, face to face with suffocation, and yet he's never been more alive. See, Morrie's not crawling toward death. He's dragging us with him so we can finally see what we've been too busy to face. He's not hiding the decline. He's narrating it, loudly, publicly, and with zero shame. Enter Ted Koppel, Nightline, big deal TV journalist, smooth suit, polished voice, national audience. He shows up at Morrie's house thinking he's getting some syrupy feature piece on a dying man. You know the type. Sentimental background music, slow fades, sound bites with meaning. But Morrie, he flips the script. Before the cameras roll, he stares down the legendary interviewer and says, "Tell me something close to your heart." Yeah, the dying man's the one doing the vetting. And just like that, the power dynamic shifts, because Morrie isn't just a subject, he's not a patient, he's not a cautionary tale, he's the teacher, still. And death didn't take that from him. He tells Ted about life, about dignity, about dependency, about love, and about the fact that soon someone will have to wipe his ass on national television. And you know what? He doesn't care. Because this is the thing about real wisdom. It doesn't flinch at reality. It doesn't need a filter. It doesn't ask for your comfort. It tells the truth, even if it makes you squirm. That episode airs, and Mitch sees it, and something cracks. Because for all his achievements, all his awards, all the fake authority that comes with having a byline and a broadcast, none of it ever hit him the way Morrie's honesty did in that 10-minute interview. So, Mitch books another ticket. He doesn't just want to listen this time, he wants to remember. He brings a tape recorder. Now pause, because here's where most people would romanticize this gesture. Oh, how beautiful, a man preserving the wisdom of his mentor. But let's be real, this is a man trying to steal time from death's pocket. It's a desperate move, a selfish one, a necessary one, because Mitch knows what we all know. We wait too long to ask the right questions. And now that Morrie's giving answers, he can't risk forgetting them. So he hits record. And for the first time in years, he listens, not with the intent to respond, but with the intent to change. And Morrie? He doesn't shrink from the mic, he leans into it. His voice is weaker now, the words are slower, but the content, sharper than ever. He talks about fears, about regrets, about how losing control over your body is nothing compared to losing control over your heart. He talks about becoming a baby again, needing help to sit, to eat, to urinate. But unlike the rest of us, Morrie doesn't just accept his vulnerability, he makes it sacred. He even jokes about the living funeral he threw for himself, where everyone got to tell him what he meant to them while he could still hear it. You think that's weird? You think that's self-indulgent? No, that's what the rest of us should be doing. Because why do we save our best words for the eulogy? Why do we think love is only worth expressing when it's too late to be received? And here's where the real gut punch lands. Morrie has become a national voice. He's getting letters from strangers, journalists, schools, people who never met him but suddenly feel seen by him. He's barely breathing, and he's more connected than we've ever been in the prime of our lives. Let that burn for a second. We, the healthy ones, spend our days doom scrolling, chasing dopamine, ignoring our families, and postponing hard conversations until a better time. Morrie can't walk, can't drive, can't even go to the damn bathroom on his own. And yet, he's showing more courage in a single breath than most of us show in a decade of full health. And that's the paradox, isn't it? It takes dying to start living honestly. We say we're too busy. We say later. We say not now. But when death shows up, it strips away your excuses. It slams your priorities on the table and says, pick. Now Morrie picked love, service, vulnerability, presence. He picked the truth, even when it made him look fragile, especially when it made him look fragile. And Mitch, he finally stopped performing, because when you're sitting across from a man whose lungs are failing but whose soul is expanding, your hustle starts to look a lot like cowardice. So the recorder keeps rolling, and Tuesday by Tuesday, Mitch starts to wake up. Not with inspiration, but with confrontation, because every tape, every lesson, every breath Morrie takes becomes a mirror Mitch can't look away from. You want to know why this story hits people so hard? Because Morrie lived what the rest of us only repost. Key takeaway: wisdom isn't about information, it's about transformation. And most of us are so busy running from discomfort that we miss the one person who could help us finally become who we were meant to be. Favorite quote: death should not be embarrassing. I'm not going to powder its nose. Entering the classroom of life. You ever notice how people treat their lives like a PowerPoint presentation? Like everything has to be organized into bullet points, optimized for productivity, and delivered with a smile while dying inside. You can feel it at every job interview, every fake networking brunch, every "how are you?" That's really just waiting for you to say, "busy." We're addicted to structure, but not truth. And that's exactly what makes Morrie's classroom so dangerous, because this man was not here to teach you bullet points. He was here to destroy your entire framework and rebuild it with love, mortality, and actual meaning. The orientation didn't come with a textbook, it came with a timeline, a ticking clock in Morrie's chest, and every second you wasted pretending you were fine, he'd call you on your bullshit. When Mitch shows up again, it's not small talk. Morrie doesn't do "how was your flight?" He asks Mitch if he's really present. He looks past the professional mask. And just like that, the illusion shatters. Because let's get one thing straight. Most of us haven't been present since high school lunch hour. We're too busy doom scrolling our worth through Instagram reels and performance evaluations, and we've mistaken busyness for purpose so thoroughly that silence feels like failure. But in Morrie's living room, silence is sacred. There's no coffee shop background noise, no pop-up notifications, just a man dying and refusing to waste a single breath on anything fake. This isn't some poetic, mystical guru moment. This is a direct hit on everything you've built your identity around. He doesn't care if you're a VP, a content creator, a six-figure entrepreneur, or the first person in your family to have a 401k. He wants to know what happens when you're alone with your thoughts. And here's what hurts. Mitch doesn't know. He's been running so hard for so long, there's nothing left when the race stops, just echoes. Echoes of ambition, of fear, of all the questions he never asked because he thought achievement would answer them for him. But Morrie flips the game. He turns his disease into a classroom, not to dramatize his death, but to force you to confront your own life. And class isn't just theory, it's practice. Mitch brings food. Morrie struggles to chew. And every cough, every dribble, every awkward pause is a reminder. You're not immortal, and this will be you someday. But Morrie doesn't hide it. He amplifies it. Because real teachers don't shield you from pain. They introduce you to it, gently, then with a full slap across the face. He teaches Mitch how to talk again. Not about sports, not about stocks, but about truth. About what it means to be vulnerable, soft, seen, and slowly, painfully, Mitch starts to open. He starts showing up not as a reporter, not as a performer, but as a scared, unfinished human being. Sound familiar? Because maybe that's what's missing in your life. Not another life hack, not another how to be successful podcast. Maybe what you need is a classroom where dying is allowed, where failure isn't shameful, where silence is an answer. That was Morrie's classroom. And no, it didn't have a final exam. It was the final exam. Each Tuesday, Morrie pulled the thread on a different topic. Love, fear, aging, family, forgiveness, death. And he didn't teach it from theory. He taught it from experience, from the place where your bones rattle and your soul finally gets honest. Because what do you say when you know you've only got weeks left to speak? You say everything that matters. No branding, no humble brags, no curated authenticity. Just, I'm scared, I'm grateful, I love you. Please don't waste your life chasing things that don't hug you back. And that's the syllabus. You want to know the difference between what Morrie was doing and what you're doing right now? He was learning how to die. You're still pretending you won't. But newsflash, death isn't optional. Delusion is. And if you're waiting for the diagnosis, for the phone call, for the wake-up moment to start living, good luck. Because by then, you'll be too busy choking on your own missed chances to finally speak. You've already been accepted into Morrie's class. He doesn't need your transcript, just your truth. But you better show up before the bell rings. Key takeaway, you don't need a crisis to start telling the truth. You just need the courage to shut up, sit down, and finally pay attention to the life that's slipping through your fingers while you chase everything but meaning. Favorite quote, we think we don't deserve love. We think if we let it in, we'll become too soft. But a wise man learns to love fiercely, even in the face of death. Facing the inevitability of death. Let's talk about your funeral for a second. No, really, yours. Not someone else's, not your grandma's, not the stranger on the news. I'm talking about the cold, absolute truth. You're going to die, and you're not ready. Because if you were, you wouldn't still be refreshing your Instagram likes like they're a vital sign. You wouldn't spend another second worrying about who ghosted you, or whether your resume has action verbs. You'd be out living. You'd be feeling. You'd be telling the people you love that you love them, not texting you up at 2 a.m. out of emotional cowardice, but you don't believe it's real, do you? You know you'll die, but you don't believe it. And that disconnect, that's what's wrecking your life before it's even over. That's where Morrie grabs us by the collar. See, death wasn't a theory for him anymore. It wasn't a philosophy class discussion. It was right there, in his lungs, in the oxygen tube up his nose, in every weak cough that sounded like it could be his last. The man was staring down the endgame, and instead of panicking, he was teaching. Everyone knows they're going to die, Morrie says, but nobody believes it. That's not a poetic line. That's a diagnosis. You don't need ALS to realize you're terminal. You need honesty, and most of us are allergic to it. Morrie wasn't. He didn't run from death. He invited it in, gave it a seat at the table, and asked it questions. He made death a partner, not a predator. When he tells Mitch, once you learn how to die, you learn how to live, it's not just some wise-sounding soundbite, it's a hard-won truth, because when death becomes real, everything else gets clarified. The crap falls away, the urgency shows up, the masks get ripped off, you find out who you are and who's still playing dress-up. What did Morrie do when he accepted he was dying? Did he lock himself away, hide under the blankets and wait for the lights to go out? No, he sat in his wheelchair and planned his own perfect day. Think about that. While most people are trying to escape death by pretending it's a myth, Morrie was imagining how to spend one more meaningful moment on this side of the grass. Not skydiving, not Lamborghinis, not selfies in Paris. He wanted a normal breakfast, a walk in the park, a slow dance, a simple conversation. He wanted to feel human. He wanted to feel alive. But you're out here filling your cart with gadgets, filters, and panic, trying to numb the silence that reminds you you're not really living. We act like death is some freak accident, a tragedy that happens to other people. But Morrie reminds us, death is not a glitch, it's the final feature. And if you ignore it, you'll miss the whole damn point of being here. We are terrified of the sight of a dying person. We hide death behind hospital curtains and white sheets. We say passed away instead of died. We send flowers instead of showing up. Why? Because death offends our illusion of control. It reminds us we're not the gods we pretend to be. But Morrie didn't flinch. He joked about his cremation. Just don't overcook me. He picked a spot to be buried, under a tree by a pond, and told Mitch to keep visiting. Make it a Tuesday, he said. You always come on Tuesdays. Even dying, the man was still setting office hours. And you still think you have time? You think your dreams will wait until next year? You think your broken relationships will magically mend themselves? You think you can say, I love you, after you've made enough money, or gotten the job, or figured yourself out? Spoiler, you can't. Morrie knew that. That's why he forgave fast. That's why he said what mattered, even when it hurt. That's why he looked his own death in the face and found peace. Because when you stop avoiding the inevitable, you can finally start shaping the present. He had nights where he thought it was the end. No breath, no strength, just a body crumbling beneath him. And in those moments, he didn't panic. he found a strange, profound calm, not because death stopped being scary, but because life had finally become real. And he tells Mitch something that should burn itself into your brain. Only when we make peace with dying can we make peace with living. So let me ask you, what would your perfect day look like? Is it happening yet? If not, what the hell are you waiting for? Because death isn't waiting, and pretending otherwise, that's the dumbest lie you've ever told yourself. Key takeaway, you don't have time to waste. Death isn't your enemy, it's your mirror, and when you finally look into it, you'll see everything that matters staring back. Favorite quote, once you learn how to die, you learn how to live. Embracing emotions fully. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Why are you so afraid to feel? I'm not talking about a sad movie tear or an awe over some puppy on TikTok. I mean really feel. The ugly cry, the stomach drop, the scream into a pillow kind of emotions, the real, raw human experience. Why do you flinch every time life pokes at your heart? Because somewhere along the line, someone convinced you that vulnerability is weakness, that showing pain is failure, that joy must be earned, anger suppressed, and grief avoided like a pothole on a freeway. Bullshit. Complete industrial strength bullshit. You want to know what's weak? Living like a locked vault, pretending your emotions are optional, playing stoic while your soul erodes. That's not strength, that's spiritual cowardice. Morrie knew that. He embodied that. Dying, suffocating, body failing, and still this man dared to feel it all. Every heartbreak, every tear, every laugh, every tremor of love or sorrow or guilt. He didn't avoid emotion. He invited it in, sat it down, and asked it questions over tea. He told Mitch that people are afraid of emotions because they think they'll drown in them. But that's only true if you never learn how to float. And floating doesn't mean numbing. It means letting the wave come all the way through and watching it leave. He said, don't cling to your emotions. Experience them fully, then detach. And there it is, the cheat code to surviving your own humanity. But most of us don't do that, do we? We bottle up rage until it calcifies into bitterness. We run from grief until it metastasizes into dysfunction. We avoid joy like it's a trap because something bad might happen next. So why risk it? What are you even protecting yourself from? Feeling? Congratulations, you're dodging the very thing that makes you alive. Morrie let himself cry. Openly and often. He didn't apologize, he didn't make excuses. He said what needed to be said. When he was hurting, he admitted it. When he was grateful, he showed it. And when he felt love, he let it in without trying to deserve it first. Meanwhile, you keep your heart like it's some VIP club with a velvet rope and a clipboard. Grow up. Stop rationing your humanity like it's on back order. Morrie had a mantra he repeated often. Love is the only rational act. That's not sentiment, that's strategy, that's survival. Because at the end of it all, when your body betrays you and the world goes dim, love, given and received, is the only thing that still makes sense. He forgave people who hurt him. He forgave himself. And he told Mitch in no uncertain terms that you have to do the same. Because carrying around unprocessed pain is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. He tells a story about a friend named Norman. The man sculpted a bust of Morrie decades ago, was like family, until he didn't call when Morrie's wife had a serious operation. They stopped speaking, and years later, Norman died. Morrie never forgave him in time, and it haunted him. Forgiveness isn't about making other people feel better. It's not even about them. It's about getting your own foot out of the bear trap you willingly stepped in. It's about reclaiming the emotional energy you've wasted, holding on to grudges like trophies. Morrie forgave people not because they deserved it, but because he deserved peace, and he knew time was short. But here's the part that will slap you upside the head. You don't need a terminal illness to start living like you're dying. You could start today, right now. Call the sibling you ghosted. Write the apology you swore you'd get to someday. Forgive the version of yourself that failed. Forgive the people who couldn't love you right. Forgive the people you had to leave to survive. And while you're at it, maybe forgive yourself for waiting this damn long to feel something real. Because life isn't found in avoiding pain. It's found in being brave enough to sit in it. learn from it, and let it pass through without turning it into permanent architecture. Emotions aren't your enemy, they're your compass. You can either keep fighting them like a fool or start listening like someone who's finally ready to live. Key takeaway: if you want to heal, you've got to feel all of it. Let the emotions come, then let them go. You are not weak for feeling. You are human for letting it move through you. Anything else is emotional bankruptcy. Favorite quote: the most important thing in life is to learn how to give out love and to let it come in. The bonds that define us. Let's start with some truth that will sting. You have a better chance of finding meaningful love in a McDonald's drive-thru than in half the relationships people jump into today. You know it, I know it. Morrie, old, dying, full of wisdom Morrie, knew it better than anyone. So when this chapter opens with him wrapped in a blanket, barely able to lift a phone, asking about love, marriage, and family, you better believe what comes next isn't sugar-coated fluff. It's a slow, surgical dissection of our collective dysfunction, and Morrie's the surgeon. Now let's be honest, we suck at love. As a generation, as a culture, we're overdosing on independence and starving for connection. You know how you want someone to be there at 2 a.m. when your soul collapses? Yeah, well guess what? Morrie had that. And he's calling out every single one of us who's too afraid, too selfish, or too damn lazy to build it. Love each other or perish, he says, quoting Auden like it's not just poetry, it's survival instructions. This is not a Hallmark card. This is a flashing neon sign screaming, get your act together or die alone. Morrie, hooked up to microphones that flopped like fish on his shirt, wasn't just spewing opinions. He was watching his own death in the rearview mirror and daring us to keep pretending like it's not coming for us too. He wasn't theorizing love from a comfy therapist's chair. No, he was living it through Charlotte, his wife who'd been his partner for 44 years, through his sons, always present, through the photos on his walls that told stories of birthdays, laughter, and yes, even arguments that ended in hugs instead of slammed doors. Love, for Morrie, wasn't perfect. It was persistent, and still, some of you are playing Tinder roulette, thinking swiping right is emotional connection. Let me say this with love, you're cowards. Real love, Morrie-style love, isn't filtered or curated. It's raw. It's when someone sees you at your weakest, with tubes in your nose and a bedpan under your hips, and still says, I'm not going anywhere. Family, to Morrie, wasn't just blood, it was the people who showed up. When the lights dim, when the crowd disappears, who's still holding your hand? Morrie makes it clear, no family, no foundation. Without love, we are birds with broken wings, he says. And yes, it sounds poetic, but it's a battle cry against this hyper-individualistic world that glorifies self-made success and forgets the beauty of being made through others. Mitch listens, but let's not forget, he's still learning. Like most of us, he came into this thinking maybe work and accolades could fill the void, but week after week, Morrie beats the nonsense out of him. Not with fists, but with truth. Family is not optional, it's the life raft when the ship is going down. Marriage? Oh, Morrie doesn't hold back there either. You think you're ready? Cool. Let's see if you can do the 4 things he lays out like commandments: respect, compromise, communication, and shared values. Miss one, and you're headed straight for dysfunction junction. The irony? Most people treat their Amazon Prime memberships with more seriousness than their marriage vows. Morrie isn't playing. He says outright, you're gonna have a lot of trouble if you don't get these basics right. Trouble in the form of heartbreak, cold beds, and awkward Thanksgiving dinners. Trouble in the form of growing old beside someone you barely know because you never bothered to talk about real stuff when you still had your teeth. And here's where Morrie throws the final punch. If you're not trying, if you don't believe in the importance of your marriage, then why the hell are you in it? It's not about the wedding, it's about the Wednesday mornings when everything sucks and you still choose each other. It's about the loyalty when no one's watching. It's about believing with your whole chest that this person is your partner in the fight for joy in a chaotic, cynical world. So while Morrie fades, his spirit sharpens. Through the failing lungs, through the shrinking limbs, he grows louder in meaning. He's teaching from his recliner like it's the pulpit, and we're the congregation in need of salvation, not the religious kind, the human kind, the kind that demands we love harder, forgive faster, and commit to something that lasts longer than dopamine hits. Key takeaway: love isn't convenience, it's commitment. Marriage isn't a destination, it's a battlefield of choice. And the real ones, the ones who make it, are those who show up even when everything else says, walk away. You don't fall into love, you build it, brick by brick, or die trying. Favorite quote: love each other, or perish. And if that doesn't slap you awake, maybe nothing will. The passage of time. You think aging is decay, you think grey hair is defeat, wrinkles are a sign of weakness, and sagging skin means you're past your prime. You've bought the whole cultural con, hook, line, and Botox. But here's Morrie, strapped to a chair, body folding in on itself, needing help just to adjust the pillow under his head, and he's spitting more wisdom than a stadium of influencers with six-pack abs and zero clue how to live. The man can't scratch his own nose, and yet he has a better grip on reality than most people with full mobility and zero spine. Morrie doesn't just talk about aging, he dismantles it like a philosopher with nothing left to prove. ALS is eating away at him, and what's he doing? Not crying for a rewind button, not wishing for his 22-year-old body. He's over that, he's grown, he's aged, and unlike the rest of society, he's not busy photoshopping his past. He's embracing the evolution, because here's the core idea. Aging isn't a curse, it's a damn privilege. Let's get one thing straight. Youth is not the golden age. It's a confused, manipulated, overhyped lie sold by ad executives who want you to fear a wrinkle more than a wasted life. Morrie saw through that farce. All this emphasis on youth, I don't buy it, he says. The young are not wise. And you know what? He's right. When you're 22, you think you're immortal, untouchable, invincible, and that delusion makes you a puppet. You fall for every scam in the self-worth circus. Buy this perfume, wear these jeans, eat these pills, chase this validation. All because you're terrified of becoming irrelevant. But guess what? Irrelevance comes not from age, but from emptiness. Morrie, barely able to move a limb, is more relevant than any TikTok influencer vomiting another life hack into your feed. Because what he gives us is not content, it's meaning. He doesn't sugarcoat the breakdown, he can't wipe his own butt anymore, and instead of hiding that, he owns it. I began to enjoy my dependency, he says. Enjoy it, let that slap you in the face for a second. He frames his own regression, not as humiliation, but as returning to something deeply human. Childlike, yes. Vulnerable, yes, but also real. Honest, unfiltered. He asks his aide if she'd be embarrassed to help him with his most intimate needs. She says no, he nods, grateful. That's grace. That's dignity, stripped of status, naked of ego. He rejects cultural shame and flips it the bird. Forget what the culture says, he shrugs, as if culture is just some petty heckler in the back row. And he's not wrong. Culture is obsessed with strength, speed, youth, and vanity. But what about wisdom? What about peace? What about a man who's faced death and found serenity? If you want to talk about courage, don't point to adrenaline junkies jumping off cliffs for likes. Look at Morrie, sitting quietly in a chair, letting his body fail, but never his spirit. He says, it's like going back to being a child again, and instead of clinging to pride, he clings to connection. He accepts help. He welcomes touch. Human beings at our core need contact, but most of us are too armored, too afraid, too busy chasing things that can't hug us back. Morrie isn't afraid of aging because he knows the real tragedy isn't growing old. It's growing bitter, scared, closed. So he opens himself. He lets the love in. Even envy, which he admits creeps in sometimes when he sees healthy people dancing or swimming, he lets it pass, he names it, separates from it, doesn't let it stick. That, right there, is a masterclass in emotional maturity, envy without attachment, nostalgia without delusion, aging without shame. He teaches us to detach from the things that don't serve us, and isn't that what maturity is? Not just more years on the clock, but better use of the time we've got left? Morrie isn't fighting to stay young. He's fighting to stay present, and that ironically makes him timeless. He tells Mitch that the only people who want to be young again are those who've wasted their time. Because if you lived fully, you'd want more of that living, not less. You wouldn't want to rewind. You'd want to evolve, and that hits hard, doesn't it? How many people do you know who treat time like it's infinite, yet panic at the first sign of a crow's foot? That's not wisdom. That's fear wearing foundation. So here's the confrontation. If you're obsessing over youth, it's because you haven't done the work to make age worth it. You haven't built a life that you actually want to grow into. You're still looking backwards. But Morrie's looking inward. He says aging is growth, and that includes decay, it includes loss, but it also includes depth, meaning, clarity, and peace. He's dying, that much is true, but he's not done living, not by a long shot. Key takeaway, aging isn't the enemy, denial is. If you fear getting old, it's probably because you've been wasting your youth. Favorite quote, if you found meaning in your life, you don't want to go back. You want to go forward. You want to see more, do more. You can't wait until 65. Society's influence on our lives. The world's just one big overpriced costume party where everyone's fighting for the best mask. Culture is the showroom, money is the disguise, and no one's asking who you are underneath. That's where Morrie comes in, wheezing like a Zen oracle with oxygen tubes in his nose, whispering the truths we all pretend not to hear. You think you're not caught in the net of cultural brainwashing? Spoiler, if you've ever tied your worth to your paycheck or Instagram followers, congrats, you're deeply indoctrinated. Morrie, at death's doorstep and free of all the pretense, obliterates the glossy myths of Western culture with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. He doesn't just talk about our society, he absolutely body slams it. While most people walk around obsessed with climbing invisible ladders, Morrie is busy dismantling the entire staircase. When Mitch shows up with that smug, careerist fog still clinging to him, Morrie doesn't flinch. Instead, he hands him, and us, a brutal syllabus on the toxicity of cultural values. Here's the thing. Culture, as Morrie sees it, is a manipulative puppeteer. It tells you what to wear, what to buy, who to admire, and what to fear. It's the reason you feel like garbage when you're not doing enough or earning enough. And this isn't just some soft academic theory. Morrie points directly to how culture teaches you to hate aging, to fear death, to define success through accumulation instead of contribution. And like any good rebel sage, he says, opt out completely. Make your own culture, one based on love, human connection, and actual fulfillment, not brand names and bank statements. Let's talk about how this self-made culture is lived, not theorized. Morrie practiced what he preached. He gave time. He gave presence. He didn't wait to retire to start caring about people. He made caring his entire profession. Status will get you nowhere, he says, and you can practically hear every hedge fund manager cringe, because if status dies with you and love outlives you, then guess what? Most of us are building monuments to dust. And here comes the knockout punch, our obsession with money. The chapter tackles capitalism's dirty little secret. The more you chase money, the more it owns you. Morrie, with all the serenity of a man who's minutes away from death, tells us that true satisfaction doesn't come from getting more. It comes from giving more. You don't need a penthouse to feel fulfilled. You need purpose. And that doesn't mean quitting your job and moving to an ashram. It means rewiring your daily choices to serve something larger than your own ego. The most devastating part of Morrie's critique is how well he names our silent suffering. The depression, the anxiety, the gnawing dissatisfaction that hums underneath all the noise. That's not because you're broken, it's because you're playing a rigged game. And he's not mad at you. He's mad at the system that told you to tie your worth to things that vanish. If our lives feel hollow, maybe it's not because we're doing life wrong. It's because we're living by someone else's empty rules. When Mitch confesses his career addiction and his hunger for approval, Morrie doesn't shame him. He slices through the illusion. Giving to other people, Morrie says, is what makes me feel alive. Let that sit for a moment. This is a man being devoured by ALS who can barely lift a hand, telling you that joy is found not in power but in generosity, not in domination but in presence. That's not philosophy, That's reality, stripped of all nonsense. We're trained to think rebellion looks like smashing windows or yelling slogans. Morrie shows us that the real rebellion is kindness in a world built on conquest, compassion in a society obsessed with performance. He talks about the need for spiritual humility, about taking responsibility for each other, and challenges us to abandon the toxic normal we've accepted as life. If you're reading this thinking, sure, but I still need to pay rent, you're not wrong. But this isn't about dropping out, it's about waking up. It's about making sure you don't trade your soul for a salary. You can't buy meaning and no one's handing it out. You build it slowly, intentionally, through who you choose to become. And if you don't think that matters, just remember this. When Morrie was dying, people didn't line up to admire his resume. They came to tell him he changed their lives. That's the real scoreboard. And most of us haven't even read the rules. Key takeaway. Reject the culture that devalues your soul. Build one that actually feeds it. Favorite quote, devote yourself to loving others, devote yourself to your community around you, and devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. Reflecting on life's choices. There's a lie we've all bought into, and it's this. Self-pity is productive. Somewhere along the line, we started worshipping our own wounds, turning emotional bruises into badges of honor, like we're in some kind of twisted victim Olympics. Welcome to the grand delusion of modern existence. But here comes Morrie Schwartz, terminally ill and practically whispering from a deathbed to slap that nonsense straight out of your mouth. Every morning, Morrie lets himself mourn. A few minutes, that's it. He checks in with his dying body, acknowledges the loss, allows a tear or two, and then, with the discipline of a Zen monk and the heart of a warrior, he gets on with the day. No melodrama, no social media posts fishing for pity, no woe is me playlist on repeat. Just presence, just gratitude, just love. Think about that. A man who is literally decaying in real time, trapped in a body that has become more prison than partner, gives himself 5 minutes to feel sorry for himself. And you? You're upset because someone unfollowed you, because your coffee order was wrong, because your boss doesn't praise your every breath. This isn't a lesson about bottling emotions. It's a lesson in emotional efficiency. Self-pity is a transaction. Spend it wisely. Use it for catharsis, not identity. Morrie isn't denying the pain, he's just refusing to live there. If grief is a guest, most of us build it a room and give it a key. Morrie, he gives it a chair, a glass of water, and shows it the door after breakfast. But the real gut punch comes when you realize that most of us are more emotionally paralyzed than this man with ALS. Because while his muscles are wasting, our spirits are. Paralysis of perspective is the real pandemic. We marinate in regret, wallow in things undone, and somehow believe that pain earns us virtue. And then we have the audacity to call this being real. Let's get something straight. Romanticizing pain is not profundity, it's laziness. And Morrie knew this. That's why he didn't just confront his mortality, he choreographed it. He used it as a syllabus. Death to Morrie was not the final exam, it was the curriculum itself. And what he taught, sitting in his oversized recliner, blanketed and breathless, was that you get to choose the emotional soundtrack to your life. Play the pity anthem if you want, but don't expect applause. And then there's regret. Oh, the seductive monster of what if. Morrie faced it like a man cleaning his house before moving out. No drama, just clarity. Did he wish he had written more? Sure. But he didn't let that yearning rot into shame. He made peace with the undone. Unlike most of us who nurse regret like a wounded pet, Morrie euthanized it with compassion. When you think about it, regret is just a form of time travel for cowards. It's a lazy man's version of action, thinking about what you could have done instead of doing what you still can. Morrie gets that. That's why he reminds Mitch, and by extension you, that there's no glory in replaying missed notes when you've still got time to write a new song. The conversations between Mitch and Morrie during these talks are intimate, haunting, and oddly humorous. There's something brutally beautiful about hearing a dying man joke about his grave or poke fun at his own physical decay. Like when Morrie quips, "Make sure they don't overcook me," talking about his cremation. The man is dying with more grace and grit than most people live with. And here's the knockout. Morrie tells Mitch to forgive himself. Let that land. Forgive yourself, not just others, because self-forgiveness is the gatekeeper to peace. You can't enter the garden of grace while dragging the corpse of your past. Morrie understood that guilt is a chain and regret its padlock, and the only key? Compassion. Not just outward, but inward. If you still think you've got time to apologize, to make amends, to fix that fractured relationship, here's a reality check. You don't. Death doesn't RSVP, it just arrives. And when it does, it doesn't care about your inbox of unsent apologies or your mental drafts of someday. Morrie didn't wait. He made peace with everyone, including himself, while he still had breath to speak it. So if you're looking for a life hack from a man staring into the abyss with wide eyes and an open heart, here it is. Don't let your yesterdays infect your todays. Cry in the morning if you must, scream into a pillow, curse the heavens, but by breakfast, put your damn shoes on, metaphorically at least, and love harder, speak braver, live louder, because here's the ugly truth. No one's keeping score on your suffering. There's no trophy for the most miserable. There's only now, and it's yours to waste or redeem. Key takeaway, you're not a hero for feeling bad. You're not deep because you're drowning. Master the art of momentary mourning, then show up. Choose forgiveness, kill regret, live louder than your pain. Favorite quote, forgive yourself before you die, then forgive others. The world through Morrie's eyes. The great irony of the modern world is this. We know everything about everything, except the things that actually matter. We binge tutorials, break our backs, hustling for six-figure dream jobs, memorize financial hacks from 23-year-olds on TikTok, but we forget the one thing that fuels it all, perspective. And that's what Morrie drops on us with nuclear emotional precision. His conversation isn't about how to fix the world, like some TEDx speaker with a laser pointer. It's not a masterclass, it's a master reality check. He's not trying to save the world, he's trying to open your damn eyes to it. So let's talk about what actually matters, how we see the world and how the world sees us. If you've ever felt like you're sprinting through life with your head down, hoping no one notices you're lost, congratulations, you're doing it wrong. And that's the premise here. Mitch walks into his old professor's home, expecting to talk about mortality, maybe hear some sentimental goodbye. Instead, he finds a man who, while practically paralyzed, cares more about people in Bosnia than most of us care about people down the street. You'd think dying would shrink your worldview. Morrie's expands it. He doesn't retreat inward, he leans outward. Mitch asks if he still watches the news. Morrie, fighting ALS, barely able to move his body, says yes. Do you think that's strange? He counters. Because here's the thing. Most of us use busyness as an excuse for not caring. Morrie uses suffering as a reason to care more. This man is crying over strangers in war zones while half the population can't cry for their own relatives because it might mess up their mascara or ruin their strong image. Let's talk about masculinity for a second. Morrie cries, openly, regularly, no shame. He says it plain. This is okay with you, isn't it? Men crying? And Mitch predictably tries to brush it off, like most men do, until Morrie promises, one day I'm gonna show you it's okay to cry. That's the thesis right there. Vulnerability is power, but society's infected us. We've let social norms become emotional straitjackets. You're not supposed to cry, especially not in public. You're supposed to tough it out, play it cool, bottle it up until your liver fails or your heart explodes or you sabotage every relationship you've ever had. We glorify emotional constipation and shame emotional literacy. Morrie flips the bird to all of that with a tissue in hand. So, what's the lesson here? It's this. If your compassion ends at your front door, you're part of the problem. If you scroll past stories of bombings and famines without blinking, but throw a tantrum when your coffee's made wrong, guess what? You've lost the plot. Morrie's not telling you to save the world. He's daring you to give a damn about it. Morrie's entire existence in his final months is a sermon of radical empathy. Not just sympathy, not pity, empathy. He feels other people suffering in his bones. He watches war reports and weeps. Meanwhile, you've got people muting tragedies because it's a little too heavy right now, as if privilege is some kind of justification for apathy. It's not. It's an indictment. And then there's Mitch. Our narrator, the stand-in for all of us modern-day ambition addicts, is finally realizing how spiritually bankrupt he's become. You can hear the guilt in every sentence. This man has interviewed grieving families for a living, attended funerals, and never shed a tear. Morrie watches a news segment and weeps for strangers. That's the contrast. That's the mirror we all need shoved in our faces. There's no productivity tip that replaces what Morrie is teaching. No app will schedule your humanity. No calendar block will substitute for soul. That's why this isn't just about ALS. This is about a worldview that doesn't wait for disease to teach it what matters. And let's be honest, most of us are cowards when it comes to confronting our own emotional void. We hide behind sarcasm, busyness, cynicism, fake smiles. Morrie, half paralyzed, nearly breathless, has more emotional range than 1,000 wellness influencers combined. He's not selling you a fantasy. He's handing you a flashlight in the darkness of your own avoidance. So if you still think tears make you weak, that global issues are someone else's problem, or that empathy is a luxury reserved for poets, congratulations, you're exactly the kind of student who needs this book most. Morrie isn't judging you, but I am. And it's time to step it up. Stop chasing relevance. Start chasing meaning. Key takeaway, your ability to care deeply, even when the world says numb yourself, is your ultimate rebellion. Feel more, care louder, hurt bigger, cry unapologetically. Because love, as Morrie reminds us, is the only rational act. Favorite quote, the most important thing in life is to learn how to give out love and to let it come in. Saying goodbye. Death makes us honest, but saying goodbye? That's the final exam in a course nobody signs up for. Most people fail it because they never showed up to class in the first place, but Morrie did. He didn't just audit the human condition, he sat front row, took notes, and handed them back to us one by one with love, urgency, and maybe just a little scorn for how blind we've been. He knew what was coming, and instead of running, he held the door open and invited it to sit beside him, to have a conversation. Most of us don't even answer the knock. When Mitch arrives for the last time, he doesn't walk in like a man going to visit a friend. He walks in like a man stepping into a cathedral of memories. Every leaf on the sidewalk a relic, every porch step a sacred rite. Morrie's house has become more than just walls. It's a hospice, a classroom, a confessional, and at the heart of it, there he is, the dying professor in bed, still doing what most of us forget to do while we're still upright. Giving meaning, giving love, giving the last of himself without reservation. He is barely alive, but don't let that fool you. His spirit is more awake than most people are after 3 cups of coffee and a motivational podcast. Here's the real gut punch. Morrie wasn't waiting for death. He was orchestrating it. With grace, with humor, with the same radical kindness that made strangers weep watching him on TV. He chose to die on his own terms, not with spectacle, not with everyone holding hands around his bed like some Hallmark movie. He waited until they left the room. That wasn't an accident, that was choreography. He knew the damage a final breath can do to someone's psyche. He'd seen it in his own past, in telegrams and cold morgues. He wouldn't let his final gift be trauma. But we're so obsessed with control, aren't we? We script everything, our careers, our vacations, even our Instagram captions, but we don't know how to script our exits. Morrie did. And even then, he didn't need a spotlight. No last monologue, just the quiet dignity of slipping away when no one was watching. A man who had lived his life in service of others gave his death as a final act of mercy. And then the burial. No lavish funeral with rented doves or My Way playing over the loudspeakers. Just rain, just wind, just a hill, a tree, and the water lapping softly at the edge like life was bowing in gratitude. Mitch stands there and does what Morrie told him to do. He talks. And the wild thing is, it works. The dead can't speak, but they can still answer. Not in words, but in all the things they made you carry. All the echoes they left in your chest. Morrie was right. Love is the only rational act. Not accomplishment, not status, not how many followers you have or what your resume screams. Those things are background noise when you're gasping for air, trying to say one last thing that matters. The only rational act is to give love, let it in, and keep showing up even when you don't know what the hell to say. And what about Mitch? Here's the real test. Did he learn? The man who once fled every moment that wasn't transactional now finds himself kneeling by a grave, talking like his teacher is still taking notes. And maybe he is. Maybe we all should be. So many people live their lives like they're sprinting towards something. Morrie shuffled into death like it was the last room of the house, with nothing to hide and everything to say. His body gave out. His spirit never touched. It walked right out with a wink, probably humming a tune. Key takeaway: you don't get to decide if you're going to die. You do get to decide if your goodbye will be an act of fear or an act of love. Most of us never think that far ahead. Morrie did. He made his death count, made it mean something. That's the final lesson. That's the only graduation worth anything. Favorite quote: tell you what, after I'm dead, you talk and I'll listen. The legacy lives on. You want legacy? You want some grand, earth-shattering aha about what it all means when the curtain finally falls and the lights go out? Fine. Let's talk about the only legacy that matters. One that doesn't get carved in marble or broadcast on TikTok. We're not talking about buildings with your name on them or your face plastered on a charity gala program. We're talking about the real, raw, unfiltered residue of who you are that clings to the people you touched. And in Morrie's case, that residue is nuclear. You can't scrub it off. You shouldn't even try. The cameras come back one last time. The Nightline crew rolls in like this is just another human interest segment, but it's not. This is a final act. Ted Koppel, once the stoic interviewer with journalistic ice in his veins, now refers to Morrie as a friend. That's what legacy does. It melts the icy parts of people. Morrie by now is a shell of who he was physically, but spiritually, he's on fire. And while most of us die clinging to relevance like it's a raft in a flood, Morrie lets go. Gracefully. Not quietly, but deliberately. Because let's be clear, acceptance isn't passivity, it's the loudest kind of wisdom. He tells Koppel that living, truly living, means being responsive, connecting, feeling, showing up for people in your full emotional nakedness. And when he can no longer do that, that's when Morrie is ready to clock out, not a second before. His bar for what qualifies as being alive is higher than most people's standards for success. It's not about breath. It's about presence. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is too busy watching the O.J. Simpson verdict, obsessing over whether a celebrity walks or rots. And here's Morrie, getting lifted off his chair to go sit on a toilet while the trial of the century is plastered across screens. Let's not gloss over that. While society obsesses over scandal, spectacle, and circus, Morrie is quietly showing what it means to live a life of actual meaning. The juxtaposition is infuriatingly poetic. Morrie doesn't rage against the dying of the light. He looks at it, unblinking. The man literally plans his own living funeral so he can hear what people would say when he's dead. Imagine the audacity, the wisdom to not wait for death to get your flowers. He hears the poetry, feels the hugs, and gives people a place to say the things they never get around to saying. And then he keeps going. Because unlike most of us who put off our humanity until a milestone or a tragedy forces it out of us, Morrie made the radical decision to live humanly every single damn day. And that right there is the final punch in the gut. You think the legacy is the book, the interviews, the inspirational quotes that get shared on Pinterest boards with sunrises in the background? No. Morrie's legacy is the mirror he holds up to your face. It's what you see reflected back at you. The cowardice, the procrastination, the emotional constipation, the denial of your own inevitable end, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope that you can still choose something better. Mitch finishes the last class, not with applause, but with silence. No grades, no paper certificates, just a dying man and a living student, both having shed everything unnecessary to arrive at the only thing that matters. Love. Real love. Not the Hallmark kind, not the performative kind, The kind that makes you sit beside someone as they fall apart and still stay seated. The kind that lets you become a legacy, not by what you do, but by how deeply you show up for others. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone will think of you as their Morrie one day, but don't count on it. That's something you earn, not with achievements, with truth. Key takeaway: a legacy is not what you leave behind, it's who you lift up before you go. The mark you make isn't your name in lights, it's the light you spark in someone else. Favorite quote: for me, Ted, living means I can be responsive to the other person. It means I can show my emotions and my feelings, talk to them, feel with them. Conclusion: you just sat through a man's slow, deliberate death, and somehow you're more alive for it. That wasn't just a memoir. That wasn't just a professor sharing lectures from his deathbed. That was a demolition job on everything you thought mattered. Your title, your grind, your reputation, your excuses. Morrie Schwartz didn't teach us how to die. He taught us how stupid we've been about living. And now you've got a choice. You can scroll away, pretend this didn't shake you, go back to your filtered distractions and scheduled numbness. Or you can act like you heard him. Actually heard him, because here's what Tuesdays with Morrie really is. It's your invitation to stop wasting your one and only shot at this life. It's a permission slip to forgive, to cry, to feel, to love, to risk, without needing some terminal illness to finally give you the green light. You don't need to be dying to start living like you're running out of time. You already are. Every Tuesday in this book, that was a rescue mission. One conversation at a time, Mitch clawed his way back from emotional numbness. And if you're honest with yourself, maybe you need that too. Maybe you're one lunch away from remembering who the hell you are, or were supposed to be, or could still become if you stop stalling. Morrie wasn't a saint, he was a mirror. And what made him powerful wasn't just his wisdom, it was his willingness to use his dying breath to wake you up. No hidden agenda, no spiritual pyramid scheme, just truth, served cold or warm, however you needed it. So now what? Buy the damn book. Don't just quote it on social media. Don't just nod along and think, wow, what a touching story. Go get the story, read every word, highlight the lines that break you, reread the ones that save you, give it to someone who's sleepwalking through their life, and then live like Morrie is still watching. Because in a way, he is, through you. Stop chasing what won't hold your hand on your deathbed. Start building a life you'd be proud to say goodbye to. That's the assignment. Class dismissed.